Good. All right, we're looking here at a senior in high school's mechanics here. So let's dive right into it. See what we got. He's currently in his season. Play that back one more time, full speed. We got the side and the back angle as usual. Um, so first couple notes to me that just kind of shoot off the page that I kind of noticed is first of all, I feel like he you can tell he's an athletic mover. He moves pretty well overall. Like he's not robotic on the mound by any means. Definitely looks like I said, he's just an athlete. As far as mechanically goes, the first thing that I notice is the way his weight shifts forward. So you can see here his weight, his knee kind of jumps over to the toes, and his body just kind of goes from standing tall on the left side of the rubber to kind of falling forward there. He's kind of a crossfire guy too, a little bit, it looks like here, which is fine. I was a crossfire guy myself. It's not necessarily ideal, but it's not necessarily something that's like glaringly bad that like, okay, we need to fix his direction. Um, the other thing that I noticed kind of too initially is he gets a little jumpy and a little extendy with his rotation here. So as you can see, um, when he starts to rotate there, his back leg fully extends back here and he kind of gets extendy. And then you can see his weight kind of just falls down the mound a little too quickly, I think, coming from probably that pushy, jumpy kind of feel. Um, and like I said, his weight is falling forward. Like you can see his chest is even starting to come forward here um, before the throw. So I think he needs to be a little more patient and try to stay over the rubber for longer. He's definitely a drift guy. Um, so I think trying to focus on a little bit more of a sit initially over the mound and try to feel himself over the mound for longer would be a focus of mine for his mechanical kind of adjustments here.
Yeah, I mean, he basically gets stuck on that backside. So you see him drift so far and kind of push off that rubber that he's so extended there, and there's just nowhere for that back hit to then try to rotate around the front side. And so you see his arm has to kind of make up for everything else. It kind of just like whips around there to try to, create enough space or to try to create enough direction to get that ball to come over the plate. And credit to him, like he throws pretty hard. He's a pretty good pitcher. Um, but yeah, like we're not gonna say he's the most polished high schooler we've had come in there, but you know what? He gets out there, he gets out. And that's kind of where you get into the discrepancy of like how much do we actually have to work on his performance? Like knowing his goals, like yeah, he would love to go out there and pump 95, but he has basically made the decision that he's not going to continue with baseball after next year. And so he's a guy that sits like mid 80s, probably touches high 80s occasionally. Um, and so really what we'd be looking at is trying to make him more consistent for this year. And I don't really think there's a whole lot of difference between consistency and then performance training. Like my cue would be almost the exact same thing. Like, can we get him to sit deeper into that back hip or hold that weight back a little bit longer before just kind of like leaking all of that forward before he gets down the mound?
Yeah, one thing kind of here that I'm noting too that kind of goes with you're talking about the sit and kind of I was talking as a big drift guy. And I feel like a lot of times when you see athletic movers, and I don't know if he plays another position, but a lot of times if you look at like position players, like transitioning to pitchers, I feel like a lot of times you see those as very much drifters. So I feel like it's common with that when versus like guys who are POs who don't move great, which not saying POs don't move great, but that happens sometimes, but a lot of times they get the opposite where they get stuck over the rubber and they can't get down the mound. So he has the opposite problem where he's getting down the mound too quickly because of the fact that I feel like he's an athlete and he wants to move quick and he probably moves his body well. So he feels like he needs to, or maybe he doesn't even feel him doing it. It's just kind of his natural kind of motion of how he throws. But what I was going to say was something that I would want to mess around with him as far as getting better at the sit would be to counterbalance his weight a little bit better with his front leg. So
Okay.
he kind of doesn't, he never gets that front leg extended, which is fine. You don't obviously have to get that front leg fully extended. But I think if in this position here, if he were to get his front leg more extended out to counterbalance that weight to allow him to sit back deeper into his leg to into his glute and hamstring ideally, I think that could be a way for him to be able to feel like he could balance a lot of these times trying to teach kids to understand how to load their glute and hamstring and how to coil their back hip. Who guys who kind of do this and fall down the mound, they can't balance necessarily in that motion. So I think to start it off, learning that is a great way to do that is to counterbalance the weight. Obviously, if you want to sit on the left side, we want to balance it with weight on the right side, essentially. So it's not always black and white like that, but I think that's something that I would want to mess around with. I think there's some water bag stuff that could really be beneficial here. The same thing with the water bag, kind of sticking that water bag out in front of you, which is just adding weight to the front side to allow you to sit deeper and farther back on the back side. I think that could be something that could really help him as far as like that initial loading phase where he kind of just falls forward. Definitely a quad loader, a quad dominant pitcher. Which again, there's pitchers in the big leagues that are quad dominant that throw 100 miles an hour. Like it's not like you can't succeed and can't throw hard because you you kind of fall forward or you load the front side of your leg rather than the back side. But it definitely is ideal and probably easier to throw harder loading the backside of your leg, loading the quad, loading the glutes, and staying back over the rubber a little bit better.
Yeah, and some of that quad dominant versus glute dominant, it's a little bit of a misnomer. A lot of it goes into that anatomy of like kind of how
For
that
sure.
individual is built. And so, I mean, we can get real nerdy from the physical therapy perspective, but if you have really long femurs in relation, so you're basically the bone between your knee and your hip, if that's really long relative to your torso, it's going to change how that moves rather, and you're going to have to be kind of a more quad dominant guy. Like you're going to have to get that forward. Rather, if you have really short femurs but a long torso, it's going to be really easy for you to sit back. And so, not that we're taking measurements here, but yeah, everyone has like this individual way that they move. And sometimes like the body does a good job of adjusting, picking what's best for it. But either way, we would still want to clean up those things. But it might be why he struggles a little bit to sit back. But I love that cue of trying to give him a little bit of counterbalance. Like you're looking at like a little Yamamoto counterbalance and
Yeah.
hold that leg out there. The first cue I had in mind will show like the individual of how we probably both coach here. Is my first thought was I would have probably tried to see, hey, can I cue him to hold that right cheek, like hold that the back of the right hip, or take his right back pocket and try to hold that towards the catcher as long as he can, and then explode from there and see if that opens him up. But again, like we're going to coach differently, and he's going to hopefully responds to one of those two cues, but you never know
Yeah.
how each individual is going to respond to each cue. But each cue kind of has the same goal in mind of getting him to sit back and kind of hold that back hip a little bit longer versus just kind of leaking out of it.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, at the end of the day, uh, being a good pitching coach and being a pitching coach in general is finding cues that work for your athlete. And there's going to be cues that work for one athlete that don't work for another. So being able to, mold with kind of with the athlete and what they have and how they move. And like you said, the anatomy of them, that's another thing that I definitely don't take into account for nearly enough, that everything is not black and white. That, like I said, something works for one kid, it does not mean it's going to work for the other kid. Chances are it actually won't. There's not a lot of cases, a lot of pitchers that are the same, have the same issues and the same things that they're working on and the same cues and the same things work for them. So finding ways to help the athlete understand what we're trying to get out of them and finding ways to get that out of them at the end of the day is what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
The other thing too that he does really well that I like is he does a really good job with his front side, and he he's able to hold his position with his front side to allow him to rotate around. So obviously, like he's a crossfair guy, he's kind of falling down the mound, but he's still able to allow that glove side, allow that front side to be in a good position to really be able to rotate around it without pulling out. So that's another thing too. A lot of these crossfire guys, they yank that glove side left for a righty, obviously right for a lefty. But in this scenario with a righty, a lot of them they yank it way open to be able to get that arm to get back on path. So I think he does a good job holding that line as good as he can and keeping that glove in a good spot, probably a little bit further down the clip here. So as you can see here, he's able to keep that front side to allow the trunk to fully rotate to be able to get out to a good spot to release the ball from where his body is without, like I said, yanking that glove side. So many times with guys that are crossfire guys and guys that are kind of falling forward down the mound, they just end up yanking that glove side way open to be able to try to get their direction back to where it's supposed to be. So he did a good job being patient and holding that line, I think, and still be able to get his arm back in a good spot to, throw strikes from the current mechanics that he has. Like I said, ideally, we want to get him to sit a little bit deeper, not be so drifty, not fall forward a little bit. But again, with his current mechanics here, like I said, that's one thing that he does well. So I think that could be something that you take along with him with his mechanical adjustments as he keeps going, as he hopefully, I know he's not playing college baseball, but in his season here, if he wants to make some minor adjustments to see if he can get a tick up in velo or two. So
Yeah. Yeah, which is always important. It's fun to throw hard and it's fun to throw a lot of strikes too.
yeah,
Being able to combine those creates a pretty good high school pitcher, I guess. Um, Especially when you combine both of those for a lot of strikes with a secondary pitch. But yeah, it seems like he does a really good job creating that big stretch there in that pec too as he comes through. Like he gets
right,
that body
right
through.
there.
Yeah, right there, and really lets himself like whip that right pec around the left hip. And yeah, he's a crossfire guy. So if we're going to talk about the anatomy, like he better have a ton of hip internal rotation to utilize to get that body all the way around it. Those guys that don't are maybe like less mobile of their hips with their hips into internal, or they're just one of these guys that are born with more external rotation than internal rotation. They probably have to land a little bit more open. And if they land closed, like all of a sudden they're running out of room for their hips to rotate around. And it's going to kind of just like leak them a lot of these like high arm side misses or these low spikes into the left-handed batter's box. And so again, it's just going back into anatomy, like taking an anatomical approach to these kids that have already gone through puberty to say like, hey, you know what? You have 60 degrees of internal rotation, 20 degrees of external. Hey, we can use that to your advantage here. We actually don't need to change this crossfire thing because you have enough range of motion to do it. I think there's a certain study that shows that it actually helps you throw harder if you can do it. Who knows though? Like I haven't actually read that study to see anything. Like if you're trying to force someone that doesn't have internal rotation into a crossfire guide because they throw harder, it's probably not going to work for them.
Yeah.
And so it's again taking that individual approach of what helps him rotate and what helps him get to a consistent point every time so that he can deliver that baseball easily.
Yeah. And that was something too that I was always a crossfire guy myself. And for a little bit during my pro career, I wanted to straighten it out, thinking that I'm like, I'm losing velocity because I don't fully rotate my back hip all the way through because I'm crossfiring. And I probably trying to fix that was hurting myself. There were probably other issues mechanically that I should have been focusing on rather than trying to straighten myself out with my direction when I didn't have a problem throwing strikes. If I had a problem throwing strikes and I'm consistently missing arm side, then that's a different thing. But I wasn't having an issue throwing strikes, and I just thought that was the best thing for me when I had no idea. I wish Bridge existed a few years back, and I probably could have came here and learned a little bit more and understood that, hey, you know what? Maybe based on my anatomy, that I don't need to worry about that. That should not be a focus of my development. And there's other things that are more important, which definitely was probably true, but it is what it is, obviously. But yeah, with him, I definitely think the biggest thing is just eliminating so much of that drift and that pushiness off of that
Yeah.
back foot, and trying to not get away from like that extendy back hip and really just falling down the mound. I think I don't know if he has command issues. When he came in, he's thrown a few times. He's filled up the zone in his pens here, but I think command wise too, it could potentially improve getting his arm in a better position and a more repeatable delivery to be able to just consistently throw better pitches and throw more strikes.
Yeah, really just creating space, like giving himself even more space for then that hit arm can just kind of freely whip through there every time. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I agree. I don't know that there's a whole lot more we want to touch on. I actually am curious thoughts here. If you go early in that clip there, he does a good job. I think you hear so much of these guys wanting to create this backward shoulder tilt, but I think that has to happen later in the delivery. He does a good job, I feel like, of getting his shoulders kind of down the mound early and they kind of stay on plane
Yeah.
with that hips there rather than like, I don't know. There's a little bit of a trend of these guys coming back and trying to tilt those shoulders backwards, thinking that they're going to get a little bit more leverage there. Be curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I was looking at that too. So he actually kind of, when he starts his delivery, because he's a drift guy, which is super common, like I said, he's kind of falling down the mountain just a little quicker than we would like with the drift. His shoulders are actually here. So this is his peak leg lift, which where he starts to drift. As you can see better on the left side. His shoulders are actually tilted downhill here. And then, like you said, he gets his shoulders on plane as he moves down the mountain, which is fine. I was a guy myself too that I was a downward tilted shoulder guy, and then I would get myself to even. So I think he does a good job with that. I think there's a couple kids that we're working with now that have crazy shoulder tilt, and I think they get
Yeah.
themselves caught, and they have to change their position of their trunk to be able to get to a position that they can, you know, clear enough space to get their arm in the right spot. So I do like the way his shoulders kind of, like I said, they start downward, which is fine. And they kind of, as you see, as he starts to go down the mountain, sit into that back leg and coil that back hip a little bit, he gets to straight there. And then as he moves further down the mound, they match the plane of the slope there. As you can see here, they're not downhill, but they're probably a little bit less than even right there. But that's a good position to be in, to be able to work downhill
Yeah.
and be able to make some good pitches.
Yeah. It's a good trunk stack position late. Um, and which I think is fine. However you get there, as long as you're getting there with into a pretty good position to deliver the ball, it's good. Speaking of, I think actually our second episode, maybe our third episode, is one of those guys that I think where we did talk about that backwards tilt.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, can't remember exactly which episode there, but yeah, one of those in that we has that kind of like exact opposite initial move from the senior here, where he's also a drift guy, but he'll really tilt those shoulders backwards rather than getting on plane. And so maybe we'll have to combine both of these two and see what
Yeah.
happens.
The only thing I got was I don't know what his repertoire is, what kind of pitches he throws, but because of his kind of his crossfire, I feel like he could be a cutter guy. I feel like he could throw a really good cutter slider combo here, kind of from his crossfire and the fact that where he's releasing the ball from, it's like, I mean, he's like on the edge of the mound over here. He's like a low 3/4 guy and a crossfire guy, so he's getting way out there with his arm. So I think he's a guy. Again, I don't know his like what pitches he throws. I remember him having a pretty good breaking ball, but I think a cutter slider combo, he could get some nasty, like a sweeper with a hard cutter or a gyro slider, and pretty
I mean,
easily, manipulate the ball from that arm angle. That's a harder spot to throw. Be able to really turn over from that position and throw a changeup, or be able to get the ball to pronate from that position with the crossfire and that. I mean, it would take some flexibility in his hand and in his forearm to be able to really be able to pronate that correctly. But I think cutter slider combo here could be lethal with a good heater.
it'd be a pretty uncomfortable at bat as a right
Yeah.
hander. You basically have a
Oh
right
yeah.
handed specialist coming there. I mean, if you're
Yeah.
going to do that, we might as well go crazy. Might as well start his initial move instead of having him set up on the first base side of the rubber. Just move
Set
his
up
starting
here.
point all the way to the first and
Yeah.
just let him
He'd be
really crossfire across.
he'd be throwing pitches starting behind right-handed hitters, and it'd be
Yeah.
nasty. It'd be nasty. So
Yeah. You're looking at like mid 80s, looking like it's coming at your left at your
Oh yeah,
left hip as a righty and just the ball ending up middle. Good luck.
yeah. Cool. Got anything else to add here?
No, I think that's good. About wrap it up for the day.
Yeah, sweet. All right, sounds good.